Welcome today to the Heritage Area Agency on Aging's Caregiver 101 series. My name is Kelly Elliott Capros, and I am the Integrated Services Director here at Heritage. We are really happy to have you on today's call. Our topic is sadness, depression, and grief. A few things before we get started. One, today's presentation will be recorded and posted to our website, and that allows for people who cannot be here today or want to reference it later. However, we will not record the Q&A period or Q&A session of the presentation, and the reason for that is because we want people to feel comfortable asking their questions in this environment. So all participants will be muted during the presentation. If you have a question, I ask that you please type it in the chat box. I will be working to summarize these questions and pose them to Susan after she goes through her slides and information. Again, we won't record the question answer part, okay? Our speaker for sadness, depression, and grief is Susan Hoyler, and Susan is a licensed mental health counselor with Mercy Family Counseling. Susan will help us understand the differences between these emotions and to help us recognize when and if we need to get help with dealing with these feelings and more. Susan has spoke at quite a few other Heritage programs before, such as Encore Cafe, and has had tremendously good reviews. So we're thrilled to have Susan here with us today for our last session of the Caregiver series for this fiscal year. Before I turn it over to Susan, I do want to say we may not be able in this 1 hour time frame to get to all your questions or answer everything that you're looking for today. So if that is the case, please contact Heritage at 319-398-5559, and a member of our team will reach out and talk to you. Okay, so if it doesn't get answered today, you've got other opportunities, okay? So with that, we can go ahead and get started. Susan, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me. I am Susan Hoyler with Mercy Family Counseling and EAP Services. EAP just stands for Employee Assistance Program, and it's essentially benefit package for employees. And sometimes companies buy them, like Mercy has a set of 8 counseling sessions for every employee that they can use. So, and they're free and no copays and all that. So we do that with some of the businesses in town. But anyway, I've been with Mercy only 4 years because I moved to Iowa only 5 years ago. So I moved here because my husband's from this area and his children and such are from here. And we've been married 17 years, and I'm originally from Colorado. So I thought, and he's a photographer and got me into it, obviously. And so I thought, to make this a little more enjoyable, I'm using my original pictures. So, and I'll kind of point out, most of them are from Colorado, some are from South Dakota, and I'll point them out. You'll see as we go. But anyway, I am licensed in both Iowa and Colorado, and as a counselor. And anyway, I just thought I would bring this up. I was asked to talk about the difference between sadness and depression. And I'm the one that put in the grief part in there, because grief is a structure all of its own. And it often looks like depression, and it can fall into depression sometimes. So I thought I would put that in there. That's kind of one of my specialty areas. My office is in the Mount Vernon Mercy Care office, doctor's office, and I'm here a couple of days a week. That's where I am today. And then about 3 days a week, I work at the Hall Perrine Cancer Center. and with Mercy. And I help with the survivorship programs for prostate cancer and also for breast cancer. And then I see a lot of cancer patients individually, and I see them there at that office. So that's another kind of specialty or passion area of mine. But I wanted to kind of share, these things with you, and let's just get started, okay? So this is a picture of, and the screens of all of you are actually overlaying on this picture. So sorry about that if that's what's happening with you guys, but this is just a river in Rocky Mountain National Park. Okay. This picture is Kenosha Pass. If you've been to Colorado, it's kind of south central and it's in the fall. But I have a education background. I was a school counselor for a long time with a really tough middle school, and I was taught to do learning objectives so we know where we're going. So I thought I would share those with you, and you're covering up what I wanted to read. So let me let me get my other paper out. But anyway, we want to learn the difference, obviously, between sadness and depression, and then learn the normal reactions to grief, and then learn some self-awareness, and then what can you do if you feel like you need to get help, if your friends or family, if it's not enough and you need kind of some outside counseling, what that would look like. So, I thought I would use the fox that was in our neighborhood back there as the representative for sadness. And I don't know why, I wanted to do it that way. So anyway, sadness, as we all know, is just normal. It's normal to be sad every now and then. I mean, when you have your adult children come home and stay for a while, and then when they're leaving, and it's sad to see the grandkids leaving, that's normal. It's normal to be kind of down after they go, or maybe even tear up and just all that. And maybe there's some stressors that are kind of pulling you down. And so it is usually just temporary, and it's usually triggered by something specific. And it really doesn't significantly like disrupt your functioning. Usually you can still go about eating and sleeping and cooking and running the errands and doing all of that. But it often just kind of resolves on its own. You just get busy, and or it just kind of gets better the next day, or you go and do something fun and it kind of cheers you up and you're able to lift out of it. And sadness is just it's an important part of life. And I love Brene Brown. She is a researcher on emotions and such. And she says, owning our sadness is courageous and a necessary step in finding our way to ourselves and each other. And, sometimes it even bonds us together with other people. So it's not, it's not like we need to be happy all the time. We need to experience the sadness of, like I said, seeing someone leave, or, oh dear, I lost this job, but maybe there's something else for me, and so it's okay to have some of those. Oh, and by the way, let me pause here for a minute. I do have some handouts, and they are going to be posted on the website, I think, right, Kelly? And they look like this. So I have a list of sadness and depression, sadness versus depression. And then I have a list of clinical depression. And then I have some things down here about grief, what's normal, when does it become depression, kind of a thing. So I wanted to share that with you. And I have some, a couple of I have 3 pages of handouts for you to pull from. You don't have to have them right now. I think They're all embedded in here. Okay. Um, so anyway, when this was a river in Colorado, and I liked how it's smooth at the top because sometimes everything's going along just fine and you're happy and you're content and all that. And then um, I put, something happens and it rocks your world, and pun intended, but it goes over the rocks and all of a sudden things, something happens that creates a lot of sadness and a lot of, wonder of what's going on. And sometimes it's up to how much are you able to tolerate this? And sometimes the sadness can go on too long, or it does interfere with what's going on in our lives. And so there's something that we call, I don't have a handout on this, because I feel like you could remember this, but when you think of your window of tolerance, that would be like everybody has a window. Let's just say it's like this, and we get up, we get up and we get down, and we kind of stay within our window of tolerance. But a lot of stress can kind of create a situation where your window of tolerance could get smaller. And like we recently moved and we've been in this remodeling thing, and it has been so stressful that just notice, me and my husband, our window of tolerance is just, we're just having a hard time staying focused and things like that. So when you're in your window of tolerance, things are calm, you're alert, you're grounded in safety, you feel safe and with that. But if things, look at the bottom part, if you get a little bit too sad, then you get depressed, you may get lethargic, you're not motivated to do anything, you get may not want to get out of bed, and it goes beyond the window of tolerance. Okay, if you go above it and beyond it in the other way, you might have some anxiety symptoms, and feel too anxious about things. And sometimes with anxiety, it is a lack of focus, and it is a forgetfulness kind of a thing, or it's, you're you it can't problem solve very well. Um, this um, this slide shows like some things that you can do for that. And at the top, you'll see deep breathing, mindfulness, and grounding exercises. So if you have a lot of anxiety, you can actually, I call it counting colors. You can look around the room and just notice the blues, the yellows, the greens, and you can say them in your head or say them out loud. And it kind of helps to ground you in the present moment. Okay. Um, and that's what mindfulness is getting in the present moment. Because a lot of times if we regret the past and we get into regrets, then we're getting out of our window of tolerance, or sometimes we worry about the future, what's going to happen. And to pull it back into the present moment is what you need to kind of put it back into your window of tolerance. Okay. And those things work as well with depression, which is, physical exercise, deep breathing, and again, getting back into the present moment with mindfulness. Okay. All right. Okay. I've decided to have the buffalo be my representative for, this was in South Dakota. Okay. For depression, because he's so big. And sometimes depression or feeling hopeless can just make you feel super overwhelmed, and it can make you feel like life's too large to handle anything. And so then depression begins to set in. So what does that look like? So this is persistent feelings of sadness, and sometimes feeling hopeless or worthless. Sometimes negative thoughts can set in. So that would be like, I'm worthless, or sometimes they even get to the place of suicidal thoughts. Um, this can last like weeks or months. Some people have depression for years, and that's when you need, counseling to help work through that. Some people need medication to help, balance their brains a bit. Um, and there can be many triggers to this, and causes as well. Sometimes it can really, really impair your functioning, like going to a job. And then it can disrupt any kind of a daily activity, and it may require a counseling. So there's a difference between sadness and depression, and they aren't the same thing. These are both areas near Pikes Peak, but very different pictures. And it's like, because depression, you can kind of work your way through it. You can still stay in your window of tolerance. I'm sorry, sadness. Did I say that right? And then depression is when it just starts to persist over a period of time, and it starts to get deeper and deeper and cloudier. Okay. All right. So I have this in your handout. So if you need this one, but this is like some symptoms of clinical depression. And this is by the National Institute of Mental Health. And I made it like a checklist in case are like, gee, I do have difficulty concentrating and remembering details. Um, and then excessive fatigue and decreased energy. Sometimes a lot of stress can do this as well, right? Feelings of guilt, worthlessness, helplessness, hopelessness, pessimism, um, and then insomnia. It can really mess with your sleep, either that early morning wakefulness, or having difficulty going to sleep. Um, and I've noticed with myself, whenever I get in times of stress, and I start waking up at that middle of the night time, that 2 o'clock time or whatever, and can't go back to sleep, I always ask myself, like, okay, what am I stressed over? And what do I need to do at this moment to settle that down for myself? And I heard recently that sometimes it's very normal to have when you wake up in the middle of the night, to have that anxious feeling. And I wonder if it's because your brain is just trying to work through the day. And so I think it's sometimes I just get up in the middle of the night and go sit in a chair, and then, read something. Usually if you can read something like that has a beginning and an end, I always think of like Little House on the Prairie books, or something that doesn't require a lot of work to read. And those are stories that are kind of below your reading level. And it's usually like something that can help your brain just get in a process of beginning, middle, and end, and get out of that swirling thinking, where you're worried about something. And it's like, just practice deep breathing, and that'll help get you grounded. And you can, if you do, I can even teach you some deep breathing techniques. A really good one is what's called 7-11, which is you just breathe in 7, like, everybody do it with me, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you breathe out 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then you breathe in again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then out 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. When you're able to do that about 3 or 4 times, it really does help. I do that in my office, and you can see people just immediately start to relax. And that breathing out more than you're breathing in makes you breathe in deeper that second time. That's the reason for that. But deep breathing doesn't have to be fancy. It's just practice it. and practice it in the shower, practice it in the car. And when you do that, then it's easier to do when you start feeling that anxiety and that restlessness. Okay. A lot of people get irritable, um, or they lose interest in doing some of the hobbies and activities. One of the questions I usually ask people that I see is, what are your hobbies and activities? And if they have a hard time telling me, it's usually a sign that life has taken over and they're so busy. And being a caregiver, I would imagine that that would be one of those incidences that it's like, well, I used to sew, but kind of don't do it anymore, you know? It's hard to find time sometimes for all of that and the things that you used to enjoy. So sometimes seeing a counselor can help you with, well, you don't have time for that, but let's think about some things that you could have time for that could help you kind of ease that feeling of kind of losing yourself or not being able to handle some of the sadness that you're dealing with. Sometimes it affects your eating, so you may lose appetite or overeat. And then let's see. Oh, persistent aches and pains, headaches, digestive problems, a lot of stomach problems. And then feeling kind of empty inside, and sometimes thoughts of suicide. And if you ever have those, definitely seek some help, because that can be addressed very easily. All right. The point is, you have to look depression directly in the face. And I love this picture because of that. Because you have to just say, I'm recognizing myself. I'm recognizing some things that I need to address, and I need to get this addressed. And the key is obviously, getting help from a counselor or a group. Attending something like this is always good. So you have to do that. I get asked a lot of times, how did I get this picture? And it's all about perspective. And the reason I have it here is because if you see this picture, there's actually a huge guardrail there. The buffalo was down a hill. He was actually even a further distance than this. So a good telephoto lens, being in a car, 5 seconds, got it done and got away from there. Okay. But the point I wanted to make with this is treatment changes your perspective, and it does make depression less scary because you've got someone who can understand what you're going through and how to help you get your way out of it. Okay. And let's see. All right. So, but moving on to grief, I thought I would use the moose to represent grief. These moose, if you've ever been to Colorado, I can tell you right where this spot is. It's Brainerd Lake. It's sort of swampy, and these moose walk through this field every morning about 6 to 7 in the morning, and they eat this willow stuff that's right there. And then you're on a road. It's a state park. You're on a road and you're taking your picture right by your car. And then when they get closer and closer to the road, you get in your car, walks across the road, and they go off in another field. But if you've never seen moose, it's pretty stunning. But I wanted to bring up grief, because grief, when I read those characteristics about depression, there's probably some of you, I know I did it, that were like, well, when I've gone through a loss, a pretty severe loss, I had those symptoms. I had a lot of brain fog. I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of I didn't want to get out of bed and things like that. And so let's talk about that. When you need to when you recognize it as grief, or when you recognize that you may need to get some grief therapy. So let's see. So a lot of a lot of the emotions are sadness and anger and guilt and regret. And all the things I brought up. And insomnia. I should have brought that up. And loss, grief and loss isn't always just over the death of someone. Obviously, there's all kinds of losses that we have. And even being a caregiver, you are probably noticing a lot of losses involved in that situation. And so you got to recognize that as grief, because it's grief is something that's important to recognize um, and to, get some help if you feel like you need that. I have this actually in my office. It's right here. These are 3 jars with the same size candle in it. And if you notice the one on the far left, that's when a loss is just happening, and it's everything that you're thinking about. It's the grief is the candle, and it's all consuming, and you're just consumed with everything that's going on, and it's all you can think about. And even if you get distracted, you're right back to it. And then the other 2 jars just represent life moving on. So it's like the point to this whole thing is, it's not that you've gotten over it. You might hear that term a lot, oh, just get over it, get over your grief or whatever. You don't really get over it, because the grief stays the same. The person is still gone. So your grief is always going to be there, but life just moves forward. And so life gets larger, I guess, So if you can see it that way, it's like it never really quite like goes away. Okay. And it's not meant to, really. All right. I love Alan Wofelt. I should have put his name in here. He's the one that came up with 6 Needs a Morning, and he is another handout I have with the handouts, the 6 Needs a Morning, and I have them explained. Okay. So, but he's a grief specialist. They don't like to be called experts, but he is actually in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I lived in Loveland and Fort Collins, but anyway, he is, I just love his books. He has a lot of books I have a couple here, and I highly recommend them. Whoops. Hold on. Well, all right. Here's one, and it's a journal companion to this one. And this is just called Understanding Your Grief. But he has a lot of books. If you go to his website, and I have his name on this handout, you can just Google his name or 6 Needs a Morning, and it'll show all of these books he has. And he has them on aging. He has them on if you have a friend with a cancer diagnosis, if you have a cancer diagnosis. I use that one a lot. And anyway, he has them all for various situations, loss of miscarriage, loss of, other things. But anyway, he has in all of them the 6 needs to have of mourning. So first of all, it's acknowledging the reality of the death, and then, or the loss, and then letting yourself actually feel the emotion of the pain of it. And then remembering the person who died. So that would be, make sure you have a funeral service, make sure you have you honor the person or celebrate the life of the person on the anniversary of the death or something, or their birthday or something like that. And then developing a new identity. Sometimes it's like, I lost my husband. So, what am I? If I'm not his wife, a wife anymore in that regard, what am I? And how do I want to see myself? And then searching for meaning, and then letting others help you now and always. Okay. And like I said, that's further explained in that handout. All right, this is when the moose crossed the road. And Alan Wolfelt always brings up what he calls grief burst. And I've heard him explain this way. And this is when you're sitting you're in a situation where all of a sudden you're reminded of the person who passed away. I remember when my mother passed away when I was 20, and I remember I was in my 30s. I was working at a job. We were having a staff meeting, and somebody at the staff meetings talked about having lunch with their mother and how they just loved it. She's such a kick. I remember saying that word, she's such a kick. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know what it's like to have lunch as an adult with my mother, and it just hit me and bummed me out. And this was several years after her passing. So you can have these grief bursts, and you might know what I'm talking about. Some people, have you heard the pennies from heaven? Every time they see a penny, they think of their person, and for whatever reason. I had a sister who passed away named Sally, who died about 10 years ago now. And Sally isn't a common name these days. And I hear the name Sally at least weekly. And somebody will bring it up as an example. Let me give you an example. Oh, we'll just call her Sally. And I'll hear that. Soon after her death, I was reading the Iliad and the Odyssey, and they actually said they sallied the troops. I didn't even know it was a verb, and so you might hear the name, or you might, see something, and it just a memory might hit you, and it just brings up what you call a grief burst. And you allow yourself to experience those because they're good. And look at it as the person is saying, hey, don't forget me. It's just a time of remembrance. All right. Things that help when you're grieving. And this is moving toward the grief and not away from it, and letting yourself cry and telling the story over and over again. Now, there's a real reason for that, because it's what we do when we need to process trauma. And what I mean by that is like I had a car accident one time, and I had to think about it, and how it happened. And it was my way of processing it. And when you process it and you're able to process it, that's a healthy thing. Now, some people in your family may not want you to tell a story over and over, and you're feeling the need to do that. That's where you find a counselor. It's okay to do it in counseling, and just, and coming with grief therapy. A lot of it is just listening to your story, and the struggles and the times when you had a grief burst in the middle of something where you didn't want to cry and you cried, and such like that. So taking care of yourself and practicing patience with yourself, calling friends and family when needed. Okay. Isn't this a gorgeous picture? It's just, yeah, that was with the telephoto lens again. It's not, yeah. All right. So how to get help for yourself or for someone. You can call a counselor or therapist. You can call a crisis line. You can even start with your doctor and just say, I lost my wife, and I'm feeling a lot of anxiety, and I don't know why. There's actually even a book by someone that says the missing stage of grief, anxiety. So there's there's a lot of help out there and a lot of resources that help. Um, and this is a bighorn sheep. Whenever I lived in Colorado 30 years, and every time I tried to take a picture of them, they would turn their bottoms toward me and I couldn't get anything. And this was a really random picture I was able to get, and I loved it. Um, let's see. A kind gesture can reach a wound that only compassion can heal. I like that. All right, this is my only picture that was taken in Iowa. Okay. Mines of Spain. And obviously it's not a real cougar there, but um anyway, the key is self-awareness. I thought that that would be, you need to be aware of what's going on. Being aware of your own window of tolerance and being strong enough to say, you know what, I feel like I'm out of my window of tolerance and I may need some help with this one. I've got too much stress and too many other things going on for me to get this back into my tolerant level, you know? And so I need to get a phone call. So how do you find that? You can start with Mercy. You don't have to use Mercy. You might have a friend who's in counseling and you have a name there. Um, Try to find people. Really, any counselor is going to be able to work with you on grief. But if you find someone who that's their passion, that's kind of a good thing too. All right. That I have, let me show you this grounding thing. I had a slide after this one. Okay. Let me go ahead and show it to you. This is actually the Great Sand Dunes. If you've ever been there, it is fantastic. It's kind of south, it's south of that Kenosha Pass. But anyway, there's a river that runs right through there. And then these sand dunes are huge and the wind just keeps all this sand in this area. It's a great phenomenon. But anyway, what I like about this is the four elements of the earth, fire, water, and air can help you with grounding. So earth is those things that I was saying, make sure it's like I'm in this room, I'm calm, I'm in my chair, go for a walk and feel your feet hitting the floor, the pavement, and you feel yourself like glued to the ground. And then let me skip to water. Water would be when you are in fight and flight mode because you're anxious or you're depressed and you're not drinking any water. You need to drink water to get your digestive system going. So you're kind of in fight and flight and everything just shuts down. So drinking sips of water, that's why I always have something. And I drink a lot of sparkling water is what I drink. So make sure you keep a water bottle near you and sip on that a lot if you're having a lot of anxiety and things like that. Air is deep breathing. I'll show you one more deep breathing technique, and that would be like the infinity sign or a sideways figure eight. And you can just breathe in one side and then breathe out one side. So you could just do it while I'm doing this. Breathe in and breathe out. And anyway, and I think of that. You can think of a triangle. So you breathe in, you hold it, you breathe out. Or you can think of a square. You breathe in, you hold it, you breathe out, you hold it. So I like visuals because I'm a visual person. And like I said, I do this in the shower. I like the figure eight thing. Um, I do it in the car. I do it when I'm walking. And when you do those things, then when you are in a situation where you're feeling yourself getting out of your window of tolerance, then you're able to kind of pull it back in. And it's a good place to start to just do some of that breathing. Okay. So I think we're about ready for some questions and answers.
I haven't had any questions posed here in the chat, but I think everybody was really listening to everything
Oh,
that
okay.
we're saying. So just by the looks of the faces on the on the people that were joining us, does anybody have a question that they want to ask here today? Oh, hold on. Before we get started, I'm going to stop the recording because we didn't want to have that
Record that part.
on that part. Okay, so I will say for those that are watching this online, feel free to call Heritage at 319-398-5559 to get linked up with the Heritage staff for more information or services that we can offer. So now I'm going to hit stop on the recording.